Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Kimpton. I am with the field marketing team at Sitecore, and welcome to today's session on digital renewal, hosted by Ayantek. We're pleased you could join us today. And just to speak for a quick moment about Sitecore before we get started, Sitecore provides web content management and marketing software to over 2,500 customers, driving more than 30,000 websites worldwide. We implement these advanced solutions through a global network of certified partners such as our presenters today, Ayantek. We were particularly impressed by their work on the Haemonetics website, and we're confident that you will enjoy learning more about this particular project. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. James McConaughey from Ayantek. James?
My name is James McConaughey, and I'm a program director at Ayantek. I'm very pleased that you could join us today for what we hope will be an interesting and informative webinar discussing the subject of digital renewal. I'm also very pleased to introduce you to Joe Laskowski, Director of Marketing Communications and E-Business, who I've asked to join me today so he might speak to the results of a digital renewal project that Ayantek has undertaken with Haemonetics Corporation. We're very interested in your feedback and questions, so please feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. We may answer a few questions during the presentation itself, but in most cases we'll reserve questions until the end of the presentation. And in the event that we're unable to answer all of the questions due to time constraints, then we will be following up individually after the webinar. So with that, why don't we get started? So the agenda today, I'm going to cover a number of things. The first thing I want to do is sort of set the stage or the context, so provide the purpose. And then I'm going to propose an idea that I've come up with, which is to talk about white elephants on the web, and more about that in a few minutes. And then we're going to focus on the digital renewal case study using Haemonetics as the example. And then following that, I want to share a few lessons learned with you, both from the Haemonetics project that we've worked on, but also just more generally, if you're thinking about undertaking a digital renewal effort. And then, time permitting, at the very end, I will have some time to address some questions. So without further ado, let's move on. So the purpose of this webinar is multifaceted. So the first thing is to identify the fact that an outdated and static website is a problem for any organization. The next thing is to acknowledge the concerns that deter organizations from embarking on digital renewal projects, i.e. the things that cause the inertia that sort of, let you leave websites alone and let you sort of be satisfied with the status quo, if you will. Next, we want to really inspire organizations to overcome this inertia by describing an example of an organization that is invested in a digital renewal project, and that would be Haemonetics. And in doing that, we can't cover the entire project, but I do want to speak to sort of three areas, if you will. The first I'll talk to is the roadmap development process. The next, which I think might be of particular interest to folks, is the CMS evaluation and selection process. And then I'm going to ask Joe to actually speak to the results of the effort with Haemonetics and the path forward. Then the last thing I want to do today is to share some lessons learned from a digital renewal project. And again, this draws on our experience with Haemonetics, but it also draws on our experience more broadly. Okay, so now let's talk about white elephants on the web. So a white elephant is a term that's used to describe something that is without use or value. There's also another expression, which is the elephant in the room. So, and the elephant in the room is that subject, that topic that nobody wants to address, that everybody wants to just sort of sweep under the rug and ignore, even though it's standing right there, as is depicted in this illustration. So what I propose is that we can combine these two terms to describe websites that are outdated and static and therefore in desperate need of a digital renewal effort. So I want to lay something out, and maybe this sounds familiar. Maybe this will strike a chord with some of you. So have you ever had the experience of either in the organization you're in currently or in a past organization where either you or someone new comes into that organization and they're guns blazing, really, really excited, have taken a look at the company's website and say, hey, if we could just do this with the website, make these improvements, we could really have a positive impact on our performance and on our business. And then what sometimes happens is that the other people in the room who are familiar with the history of the website and have seen many people attempt to make changes in the past all uniformly roll their eyes, shrug their shoulders, and say, okay, here we go. He doesn't know or she doesn't know. They're sort of uninformed, if you will. So basically, there can often be a less than enthusiastic response because in some organizations, the website becomes like a third-rail topic or that white elephant in the room. So there are lots of reasons why organizations don't act, and I'll say that these are their sort of perceptions. They have some truth, but they're very much the perception. So the first is that an effort to renew the website is just too gosh darn expensive. It's too time-consuming. It'll just take that too long. That we don't have the resources or the expertise. We wouldn't know where to start. So let's move on to the next topic. There are just too many other competing priorities, and therefore it just doesn't filter up the list, if you will. Oh, and then there's the need to deal with those guys in IT, and with all due deference to folks in IT, I think that there are many in organizations, in business areas, and business units, who know that sometimes when they need to get IT involved or they have a problem that they need to solve, they don't always feel that IT is as helpful or as they might be. And then another one is that the website is not a sales channel. So, if you don't use your website to actually conduct sales, then, how important can it really be to your organization? Why would you want to focus on it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the list goes on, and in many cases there are combinations of these. But again, I'd say that these are, and oftentimes this is a sort of perception, and that, I would argue that in the vast majority of cases, a much more compelling argument can be made to overcome this reluctance or inertia. So now let's say, what's at risk? Let's talk reality. So the reality is that your website is what a majority of people will use to form their first impression of your organization. Remember the saying, you get one chance to make a first impression. And increasingly, people will use your website if they're not familiar with you and they want to find out about you. That is where they will head. But it also impacts people who already have a relationship with you, because their visit to your website over time will impact their feelings or their perception about your organization, its health, vitality, and its prospects for the future. So it's very, very important both for new and existing visitors. And when we talk about visitors here, we're talking about groups that go beyond just customers. You've also got to think about investors, employees, donors if you're in the nonprofit business, or potential partners. All of these types of organizations will generate an impression about your organization from your website. So the reality is, if any of this sort of rings true, I'm going to ask the question, how much longer can you afford not to act? And I would encourage you to act. So now I'd like to get into the case study, which is of Haemonetics Corporation. So, just to sort of set the stage, I want to provide a little bit of background on Haemonetics. So, Haemonetics is a successful global business engaged in blood management solutions market, and the critical thing to understand about Haemonetics is a large part of its growth and success over the last several years has been a result of a strategic acquisition strategy. They have acquired a number of organizations that have significantly expanded their product lines over the last several years. In terms of the products that the Haemonetics sells, they deal with medical devices and consumables. They deal with software products and consulting services, all designed to help organizations engaged in the blood management solutions market. So who are the customers? So their main customer groups are these three entities. So there are hospitals who use blood in surgery for transfused blood, who also like to collect blood and then reuse the blood. So basically collect the patient's blood, clean it, wash it, process it, and then return it to the patient, because it's far, far safer for the patient to receive their own blood than it is necessarily transfused blood. Another customer is blood centers. So these are the organizations that run blood drives, and that people go in and give blood in order that the country has a healthy supply of blood to support transfusions no matter what they're needed for. And then the third customer is plasma centers. So these are organizations who are engaged with the development of blood therapies for serious diseases. And these are a very large part of Haemonetics' business. So just to give you some sort of idea as to the sort of size of the organization, for fiscal year 2011, the revenue was approximately $680 million, and on that, the net income was approximately $80 million. So it's a very substantial organization and continues to grow. So the next thing we want to talk about a little is their prior digital strategy. So in this area, their main focus was on their corporate website. And the website was designed and implemented and hosted by a digital agency, which was extremely convenient when it was first done. But what had begun to occur was that the whole process of making updates to the website, because it was designed and maintained by this agency, were much more time-consuming and costly than necessarily they wanted, and therefore limited the amount of updating that they felt able to do. The other thing to say is that the primary focus was as a means to provoke investor interest and then direct them to the investor relations site. Sort of secondarily, I would say that the site provided U.S. domestic job seekers with an ability to view and apply for open positions. And then lastly, as is the same with anything that is left for some period of time, the visual design and user experience had become a little bit dated. Another very important thing to recognize in the Haemonetics case study is that, as a result of their acquisition strategy, they acquired a number of companies, each of which had their own websites with their own product information and background information. And Haemonetics did not feel like it was able to accommodate all of this within the existing corporate website that it had. And so these sites were sort of left, which led to this sort of this fragmented, existence of product information across a variety, actually up to a dozen different sites. And the sites were essentially left intact with the original branding, with the exception of the addition of the Haemonetics logo and a simple statement to sort of say to the effect that these companies had been acquired by Haemonetics. So this slide shows you an image of the prior website. So I think, as you can see, it does look a little bit dated, if you will, and so this was a big impetus for Haemonetics. And I would also say that it wasn't consistent with recently creative visual identity standards and guidelines. It really didn't portray the company in the manner that they were looking for. So the next area I just want to spend a few minutes talking about is this idea of a roadmap development. So this is, okay, so you decide that you want to undertake a digital renewal project. So what is it? What are the steps that you need to go through? How do you figure out what it is that you need to do? So the first thing that we undertook was a series of research activities. And so these ran the gamut from strategy workshops with groups of Haemonetics employees, We also conducted stakeholder interviews that were, allowed us, to get in depth on a one-on-one basis with, senior members of the Haemonetics staff. We also did stakeholder surveys, which just allowed us to sort of broaden, if you will, the scope of or the number of people that we could include and get opinions from. A very important part of Haemonetics business is its customer support. So we conducted a customer support focus group with representatives from the two arms of customer support for Haemonetics. So that's sort of customer service, which are folks answering phone calls, responding for requests for invoices, that kind of thing. But then also the other side is field service. So this is the organization that deals with repairing devices, whether they be at a depot or whether they actually go on site to the customers. So we had a focus group with them. We also engaged in customer interviews, and we deliberately selected customers from the 3 different markets that Haemonetics serves. And then last but by no means least, we conducted site reviews of existing existing competitors just to see what it was that they were doing. So with that said, there's a question, or a question has just, we've just received a question related to that, and I'm going to pose this to Joe. So Joe, the question is this: how important was the review of competitor sites, and was there anything in particular that you learned from this?
The competitive analyses actually proved to be very important to us. First, just in establishing credibility with the different product groups throughout the company that were concerned about whether their needs were being met. But then also, a few things that really came out to the forefront. First was how other companies were handling localization and translation, because our international representation on the web was increasingly important to us. Secondly, we got some really good insights in regards to customer support features that we wanted to emulate moving forward. So those were probably the 2 biggest insights gained.
Thank you, Joe. I hope that sort of, what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we take advantage of Joe while he's with us and get some of his insight into some of these questions. So, out of all of this research, or with the results of all of this research, we did some synthesis and we had discussions with Haemonetics, and what we wanted to do was then come up with some key recommendations. So just going through these, the principal ones that we derived. So the first was to create a singular Haemonetics web presence. So again, this was the idea that we wanted to consolidate the information from all of these different websites from the acquired companies and make sure that there was a singular web presence that was consistently branded, etc. The next was we wanted to provide that comprehensive and market-focused product catalog. So again, rolling all of the products from each of the acquired companies into a single product catalog that would allow universal access to all customers for all products, services that Haemonetics offer. We also wanted to position that in a way that made it clear that Haemonetics understands the specific needs of the 3 key markets, the hospitals, the blood centers, and the plasma centers. We also wanted to offer a service-oriented portal to train, educate, and allow deep collaboration with and between customers. Here the idea is to develop more of a relationship with the customer and to provide services through the website on a 24/7 basis that would support existing customer support channels and provide a valuable service and give Haemonetics, if you will, a competitive advantage by providing this access. We also wanted to establish a secure, personalized platform with features such as replacement parts ordering, order tracking, and access to customer letters. So here the idea was to implement a registration process, and then based upon a user's registration and their association with a company or a customer, we could give them information about their orders, their invoices, that kind of thing. And then lastly, but by no means least, We wanted to provide localized messaging and content for Europe, Japan, China, and the rest of the world. Haemonetics is a global organization, and it was deemed, or it is deemed, very important for them to present the information that they have in these foreign languages to allow the maximum use by their customer base. So we went through this process. We developed key recommendations. We also, I've summarized the key recommendations in the prior slide, but out of this, a number of features and content types emerged. And the key theme for this slide is that there were a significant number of them, and there is no way that anyone could really undertake all of these in one go. And so it became important to prioritize these, and I would suggest this is the same no matter where you go. So in this case, what we did was we prioritized things by considering both customer impact and competitive impact. And as you can see from this slide, in the upper right-hand quadrant, we identified those content types and features that we felt would have the greatest impact. So these were the strategic initiatives. So going beyond that, even having identified the sort of set of things that we felt were most important to be accommodated in the redesign, we also recognize that the more things you put into a site, the longer it's going to take for you to develop it and deploy it. And it was thought that it was important to provide at least an initial new site sooner rather than later. And so we further broke those strategic initiatives into sort of three buckets, if you will. So the first two buckets were undertaken in Haemonetics fiscal year 2012. So that wrapped up in March 31st of this current year. So there we basically did two separate releases, where the first release put out that what we felt was the most important material and content, and then we incrementally added and extended that functionality with iteration 2. Right now, as of today, we're continuing on with phase 2 and beyond, looking to do, implement further of those strategic initiatives that were identified. So now let's think about the CMS evaluation and selection process. So a key component of a digital renewal project will be the consideration of what platform you want to deploy and build this new site on. So when we talk about CMS, we have to recognize that the web CMS system space is very dynamic, includes hundreds of, if not thousands of products, and they change. There is a constant sort of churn and flux in this space. So it's a very dynamic market, and you need to understand the players in it, and some of the players come, some of them go, some of them get acquired. So the point is, it's an extremely dynamic marketplace. That said, from schedule, budget, and overall practicality perspectives, an evaluation of this nature requires casting a wide net, but very quickly zooming in on, strong candidates that can then be further evaluated, if you will. So in order to do this sort of candidate selection, Ayantek leveraged its knowledge of the web CMS market, its understanding of Haemonetics' needs and its information technology environment and direction, and also, third-party research and literature, industry literature, for example, Gartner's Magic Quadrant for Web Content Management. And I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about the Web Content Management the Magic Quadrant. So this was the quadrant that was in play at the time we were making the selection for Haemonetics in around the sort of May timeframe of last year, April, May of last year. So what we did here was, given Haemonetics is a global enterprise organization that continues to expand and acquire additional companies, they really need a robust enterprise CMS system. So we looked in the leaders quadrant, if you will. And if you look in the leaders quadrant, then quite quickly you're able to eliminate, or we were able to eliminate certain packages or certain vendors on the basis of their cost. They were prohibitively expensive at an entry level. So once we sort of filtered those out and considered a few other factors, we identified 3 candidates for further evaluation. And these 3 candidates were Sitecore, Oracle, and Ectron. I will say that Oracle, is not only in the leading Magic Quadrant here, but Oracle was also put on the list because Humanetics IT use a lot of Oracle products, including their ERP system, and Humanetics IT understood that Oracle had a CMS solution, and so they wanted us to consider that because it just made sense given their environment and the other things that they're doing. So the results of our evaluation can be summarized in the following sort of key areas, and we selected these based upon the requirements at Humanetics, and these may vary from situation to situation, but I think they're a fair sort of example, if you will. So the first is feature delivery and user experience. So will the product support implementation of the functionality defined by Humanetics? Obviously very important. Authoring functionality. So in the case of Humanetics, we knew that they wanted to be actively engaged in maintaining the website after it first was put up. So having an intuitive, easy-to-use, robust interface to support the authoring was absolutely critical. Cost and schedule. So we need to consider the license cost, which we already used up front in order to hone in on some candidates, but then between the actual candidates for evaluation purposes, let's compare their license cost, and that's both initial license cost and ongoing maintenance. Depending on the product, can be less or more development required. So if a product comes with a whole set of pre-built widgets that can be leveraged, then that can give you a leg up and can reduce the development time. And then there are other considerations. So these are things that are sort of above and beyond just the features, authoring, and cost and schedule. And we get into some of these maybe a little bit later, but a good example was we took the time to make some phone calls, or we asked each vendor to provide us with some customer names so that we could reach out to them and ask them about their experience with each of these products. And I would say that this was a very, very powerful activity, and that universally with Sitecore we got very positive responses, not only for the product itself, but also for the support of the product after sale, if you will. So as you can probably tell by the fact that we're co-sponsored with Sitecore today, then you can see we selected Sitecore for this solution. And we did that because we felt it was the strongest foundation, and it also had the greatest flexibility and extensibility. Because even though today we know, or at the time we knew, that Humanetics' initial requirements were relatively straightforward, we knew that over time that they would want to extend this website, they would want to take advantage of more of the advanced features, and we felt that there was no question that Sitecore demonstrated the greatest potential for extensibility moving forward. So in the end, Sitecore was the strategic selection for Humanetics, and that is the basis of the platform today. So there's another question that sort of has come up about this CMS evaluation process. So the question is, how involved was were Humanetics personnel in the evaluation process? And rather than have me answer that myself, I'm going to hand it over to Joe and ask him to give us his take on that.
Thanks, James. I would say we were very involved throughout the process. In fact, it was a very rigorous and disciplined approach to all of this. Ayantek conducted the initial research and identified all the candidates, and then we participated in the demonstrations of each product. My team asked a lot of questions, and then both Ayantek and the Haemonetics teams combined to rate each vendor along a number of different metrics. All of this was then factored into our recommendation in the final selection of Sitecore. And I think one really important part of that was that we had our IT team involved as well. And this was a key ingredient because we have Oracle as part of our enterprise-wide system. They had asked that we include them in the initial evaluation. But after we got all of the different criteria of the vendors out on the table, everyone agreed that Sitecore was really the best choice for us.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Again, I'm just hoping that providing a little bit of the customer's voice will be a powerful thing here. So moving on, what I'd like to talk to, or what I'd like to actually ask Joe to talk to, is to show you some of the results, and then just talk a little bit about, now we have this, or now Haemonetics has this platform in place, what are the things that they're planning to do moving forward? So, once again, I'd like to welcome Joe, and I'm going to let him take the floor here.
Okay, James. Thanks again. So what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is share some of the highlights of our new site and hopefully provide you with some appreciation for the improvements that have been achieved. So this first slide reminds us of what our old homepage looked like. Designed it from both internal and external feedback. We had indications it didn't adequately reflect our market positioning or the portfolio of products and solutions that we had accumulated over the last several years. So this is an example, or this is the rendering of the new homepage, and I'd like to point out a few things about it. First, because we were consolidating all of our recently acquired assets on the digital domain, in effect relaunching our brand, the new site homepage has a clean and contemporary look that's entirely consistent with new corporate brand identity guidelines that we established in parallel with this project. The second point is that banner section at the top where it says improving operational efficiencies for blood centers. That provides us with an opportunity to change our messaging, to keep the site current, allowing us to promote new products, recent clinical research that we've completed, our attendance at major congresses and events, and just recently, yet another acquisition that we just announced. And finally, those pods down the bottom of the page just provide intros and links to key sections of the site, customer testimonials, market segment overviews, and access to thought leadership. Now we're on to some of the navigation of the old site. You can see it was a combination of section links across the top and then overlapping nested navigation on the left-hand side. Because the platform upon which the site built was pretty dated, making any changes or enhancements to the navigation of the site taxonomy were both time-consuming and expensive. The new site, in contrast, includes within each section of the top 5 primary navigational elements. And if you hover over any one of those elements, you get a drop-down menu. In this particular case, you'll see that it illustrates a comprehensive product drop-down menu, enabling one-click access to each of our company's devices, software, and services. And this was very important for us strategically to represent our entire portfolio in this manner. This slide shows an example of the type of product information that was included on the old site. It did not provide as comprehensive an overview of each product as customers had requested, plus the formatting from product page to product page was somewhat inconsistent. It should also be noted that the old site didn't include information for many of our old products. Much of the information, as James said, resided on the sites of the companies we had acquired, and because we knew a web consolidation and redesign project would be required, we held off on much needed work. Whereas this new home page that you're looking at now, every product page from product to product is represented and laid out in a consistent format, and it provides us with the ability to customize certain content elements based upon what we believe is the most useful material for the product in question. For example, in some cases, as we show here, we can have customer videos talking about the merits of this particular product. But in others, we can change that same pod to focus on what's new about a particular product. Importantly, all of the product pages enable customers to access a Contact Us link, thereby opening a product inquiry form that is then routed to the appropriate people based upon the product, as well as the user's identification of his or her country of origin. Another big improvement with the site is significantly expanded video capability, which leverages the Brightcove Video Cloud platform. And in addition to the video widgets on the home page and product pages, we can launch in-context video overlay windows from anywhere on the site. We're also about to implement a new feature that will enable us to provide selected additional video content to registered users and or customers. So perhaps aside from the visual design and user experience, which have been improved, really what's most important to us is to bring some attention to the analytics that underscore the benefit of this digital renewal effort that we've undertaken over the last year, year and a half. So these stats reflect stats from 3 months prior to the launch to the last 3 months running. So first, we've seen a 30% reduction in bounce rate for our site. We're seeing a significant increase in both pages per visit and visit time. The reduction in new visits means that a greater number of visitors are actually returning to our site. All in all, the site is much more sticky and means that we're having a much more powerful platform to leverage moving forward. And then that last bullet there down in the lower right-hand corner just is an indication of the number of inquiries we're getting from various forms on the site, which are transmitted based upon topic, product, and country to the appropriate customer service personnel for follow-up. So where are we going from here? Well, the focus this fiscal year is in localizing the site. So translations is what my team is focused on now. We'll be localizing the site in 5 languages over the course of the next year: German, French, Italian, simplified Chinese, and Japanese. We also continue to add new functionality for customer service and tying into our back-end, our systems. And then finally, we're moving forward on personalization and targeted marketing using some of the new functionality that Sitecore offers us. So with that, let me turn it back to James.
Thank you, Joe. Hopefully that provides some insight into the tangible and real benefits that the digital renewal project for Haemonetics has resulted in. So what I want to do now is just spend just a couple of minutes and provide, some thoughts or share some lessons learned, if you will. And again, these are not specific to just the Haemonetics project, but I think they're things that I think it will be helpful to people to understand. If you're considering undertaking a digital renewal effort, then these may sort of help you, if you will. So I've said it, I think, a couple of times already, but it can't be stressed enough that undertaking a digital renewal effort is really the first step of a journey. If you recognize and value the need of having your website be a dynamic and constantly updated resource that is underscoring the value of your brand and the fact that you're really committed to your customers and that you're committed to the digital channel, then undergoing this digital renewal is just the first step. It requires an ongoing commitment in order to leverage the platform that you put in place. I think the next thing that is particularly important is with any kind of corporate website, there are a lot of stakeholders. And there are a lot of stakeholders who may have different takes or different priorities. So it's absolutely essential that you communicate and manage expectations, and so that everybody understands what the plan is, what your roadmap is, and where in that roadmap they should expect to see the things that they're particularly interested in. And the thing I'll say about this is that, as with any plan, plans do change, so it's important to keep that plan updated, and it's important to make sure that all of the stakeholders are in the loop. The other thing that's going to happen is, in most cases, you will have far more initiatives, if you will, than you can possibly bite off in a single go. So you need to prioritize those, and so there is likely to be some horse trading between content and features, and you need to manage that, and you need to make sure that everybody understands the rationale for doing what you're doing in the order that you're doing. Engaging legal and regulatory. So in the case of a medical device company such as Haemonetics, this is key. There are requirements that the FDA places on companies such as Haemonetics that must be addressed as you design and implement your website. Medical devices are not the only regulated industry, so I just sort of raised that. If that is a concern, you absolutely need to get your legal and regulatory personnel involved early and keep them engaged, because they will slow things down. The last thing you want to do is be ready to pull the trigger and then say, oh, have we run this by legal or regulatory, and then see what happens. So the next item is proactive management of international outreach. So I can't really stress this enough, but providing updates and sending sort of slide decks with material about how the design is progressing and what have you are useful, but they're not sufficient. You really need to engage with your international partners, because at some point in the process they will make their voices heard, and so you really need to get them at the table, engaged and feeling as though they are part of the process and that they have input as early as possible to ensure that the website design and implementation goes as smoothly as possible. IT department engagement is critical. As Joe spoke to the involvement and engagement of IT with the CMS selection. Even though in Haemonetics' case the site is actually hosted elsewhere, it's not on the Haemonetics network, it was still important to have them involved, because as we identified in the path moving forward, those extended customer features that will require integration with back-end systems will require the IT department's cooperation, and so building that relationship and caring for that relationship throughout the project is absolutely critical. Engage with a trusted digital partner. A little bit self-serving, yes, but what we would say is that, as you can maybe tell, there is a lot involved in undertaking a digital renewal project. And you probably, as I said, one of the reasons people don't undertake this is because who on earth is going to do it? You have access today to a wide variety of partners that you can have help you, and I would say Ayantek is obviously a very good example, but they can help guide you through this. They can help manage it. They can help you set it up in a way that you take on sort of bite-sized pieces, but ultimately you reach the goal that you're looking for. So just to sort of wrap this up, and before I address some questions with any remaining time, I just want to provide some closing thoughts about the site, and I think it's important to just underscore, at least in this case, Haemonetics has experienced a reduction in the bounce rate of 30%. I'm sorry, I think maybe the slides are a little bit behind. Okay, here we go. So a very significant reduction in the bounce rate. Similarly, both pages per visit and average visit duration have essentially doubled. Returning visitors are up by 18%, and they're getting now greater than 70 form submissions a month, many of which are opportunities, requests for quotes. They are live leads that Haemonetics can then follow up on. So then, just some thoughts about trying to tie all this together with the purpose at the front. What I would encourage you, or what I would suggest, is that the risks of ignoring your digital strategy are high today, and over time, moving forward, they're only going to increase. The web is here to stay. People are using it for more and more things, and again, those people who want to find out about you, they're going to be knocking on your website's door, and you get one chance to make a first impression. What would you like to do? The second point is that the technology and professional services that are available today, you've never had more, greater options, and to be honest, greater cost-effective options to help you through this process. You really should not look at this as, oh no, this has to cost us a fortune, it'll take too long, there's no way we can do it. Engaging with a trusted partner, they will guide you through this, and they will break it down into pieces that you can manage. And once again, if I haven't said it enough, digital renewal is a critical first step in reinvigorating your organization's use of the digital channel, but it is just that. It's a first step, and I would encourage you to see it as the first step in an ongoing commitment to the web and to the digital channel more broadly. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you don't, your competitors will. And 3 or 5 years from now, you may not feel that your current website is impacting your business, but do you really want to say that that's going to continue to be the case, given all of the evidence to the contrary that I hope that we've tried to provide here? So, with that, I'd like to sort of open it up to, or we can address any questions that you might have. So if you have submitted any questions, then we can certainly go through those. And let's just sort of take a look here. So I see one question that was submitted was, did we get into any business process development or re-engineering? So yes, I would say absolutely we did, because a big part of the website was providing this additional customer support access point, and so just building forms that allow people to submit inquiries via the web or support requests via the web, is one thing, but you need on the back end the process to follow up to that. So we certainly, had to modify certain standard operating procedures within Humanetics in order to account for the fact that, there is now another channel or a source, from which we're going to receive these requests. Another facet of this is the difference between customer support that is offered within the U.S. versus that which is provided externally. And so we absolutely, we looked at those two things, if you will, separately, and provided tailored customer support questions and forms and contact points based upon people's location globally. So, I think to a certain extent, we absolutely did do some process re-engineering, and we're continuing to do that today in a number of areas in the customer support arena. And we also, hope that ultimately what we will be doing is integrating some of these forms directly into Salesforce.com, so that if there are product inquiries, that they're being fed directly into that channel, if you will. So I see another question that I see here is whether we can provide any examples of other considerations from your evaluation of the CMS products. So yeah, I would say that, I mentioned it earlier. I mean, one key thing was we asked for contacts for organizations that had used or implemented the CMSs. We spoke to 2 or 3 organizations in the case of Sitecore, and we also spoke to Ectron and Oracle customers. But what was noteworthy was that in the case of Sitecore, not only were the customers very happy with the platform and the implementation effort, but in each case, they specifically commented that they felt that the post-implementation support was extremely important. Another example, actually, and this is a little softer, but Humanetics is a global organization, and Sitecore's headquarters is actually outside the U.S. It's in Europe. I believe it's in Denmark. And one of the things that is commonplace in Europe is to travel a few miles in each direction and encounter multiple languages. That's not something that sitting in the U.S. is quite so common, but with Humanetics being a global company, the ability and the support for the multilingual sites was seen as absolutely critical, and we just felt like Sitecore possibly had a greater appreciation of that just as a function of where it is headquartered. So again, a softer thing, but it resonated with us. So then I have one question. So what's the next big thing for the Humanetics site? So I think I would really just, in answer to that, I would reiterate what Joe said, which is, and consistent with the global organization and consistent with the sensitivity to language, right now our focus is to implement these 5 foreign language sites, 4 of which we hope to have done in July of this year. We're starting with French, German, Italian, and simplified Chinese, and then we'll follow behind that with Japanese. But it's likely that additional languages will be added in the future. We're also in the process of adding a registration and login capability, which will allow us to provide secure access to certain customer-only materials, training materials, other videos, etc. So again, trying to basically now leverage the site, establish relationships with people who work for Humanetics customers, and just build the idea that the Humanetics website is now somewhere that you want to go as a first resort, and that you can get a lot out of that site, and that Humanetics is committed to maintaining and expanding it. So I think that about covers the questions that we've received, and what I would suggest is why don't I hand it back just to Peter to close out. But the one thing I will say, and I will encourage you to do, is that in the event that you have any questions or you're interested in finding out more, then please do not hesitate to reach out to us and shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to speak with you further, and I hope that you found the presentation helpful and informative.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. Certainly, ladies and gentlemen, we do appreciate your attending this event this afternoon. If you do have any questions, as James said, certainly we're available for contact, and the information is posted on your screen. The link to the material that you were presented with today will be sent within the next day or so. And certainly when you attended this session, you provided your email address, and that's where the material and information will be directed to. Once again, we certainly do appreciate your time and attention today, and please do not hesitate to give us a call or email if there are any questions we can answer. It's been a pleasure to host this event for you this afternoon. Have a good day.